Today's story is so quiet and intimate, it will stay with you long after the fire goes out. Set against the vast silence of the American West, where wide skies hide deep wounds, and fate waits patiently in the shadows. This is a land where broken souls cross paths not by chance, but by necessity. Where danger doesn't always come with guns and survival, sometimes means learning how to be touched without fear. It all begins with one simple moment, a pause, a choice to not take what is expected, and in doing so change two lives forever. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The wedding was plain and unadorned, carried out in the Crow way, prayers offered to the four directions, modest gifts exchanged between families, and a quiet feast that lingered until the stars rose and the fire sank into embers. Vesper Hale, a widow for 2 years and a schoolteacher long before, that sat beside her new husband inside the teepee that would now be their home. Her hands would not stop shaking. At 31, she was old enough to understand what was expected of a woman on her wedding night. Old enough to remember it. And that knowledge was the very thing that hollowed her chest with dread, stealing her breath before it could fully rise. Her first husband, a preacher named Abel Knox, had been a man of scripture, an unchecked hunger, seeing no conflict between faith and entitlement. On their wedding night, he had approached her with the certainty of a man convinced he was fulfilling a divine right, taking what he wanted without noticing her fear, her stiffness, or the quiet tears that soaked the pillow beneath her cheek. He had been abrupt, unfeeling finished before she could even gather herself. When it was over, he turned away and slept, while she lay awake feeling emptied and diminished, asking herself whether this was all marriage was meant to be. Over the next 3 years, she learned the answer was yes. Abel came to her bed when desire struck, performed the act with cold efficiency, and never once asked if she wished it, welcomed it, or felt anything at all. When fever finally took him, Vesper mourned him before others and felt only relief in the silence of her own thoughts. She had sworn never to marry again. Traveling west to teach at a mission school on the Crow lands had been both an act of purpose and escape from pity, from whispers from the narrow judgments of Boston. She had expected solitude, a life of books and lesson plans, and had accepted that fate. Then she met Crowshade, and everything she believed about herself fractured. He was a warrior and a horsebreaker respected not only for strength, but for restraint and wisdom. He first came to the mission school to retrieve his nephew Foxon, a boy who cried for his mother and refused the missionaries' unfamiliar food. Vesper had brought the child to him, and in the way Crowshade looked at the boy, gentle, steady, she saw something that contradicted his fierce reputation. He thanked her in halting English. She replied with a few Crow words she knew. Something sparked between them, unplanned and unmistakable. He courted her slowly, as his people did. Small offerings came first, a feather, a river-smooth stone honeycomb wrapped in leaves. He watched her, teach his gaze attentive in a way that made her skin prickle, as though he truly saw her. In the evenings, they walked together. He taught her the names of plants and stars, spoke of ancestors in a voice deep as distant thunder. Without realizing when it began, Vesper fell in love. But love did not erase fear. It could not undo what Abel had carved into her, the belief that her body was something to be used, that closeness was something to endure. As the wedding neared her, unease deepened. Sleep brought nightmares, where Crowshade became able, gentle hands, turning harsh, patient eyes, turning cold. Twice she nearly fled back east, back into shame. Each time something held her in place. A quiet hope. Now sitting beside him in the low firelight, her trembling returned. Crowshade had not touched her since the ceremony. He had not reached for her or drawn her close. Instead, He sat across the fire legs, folded dark hair loose, watching her with eyes that seemed to recognize every fear she carried. "You're afraid," he said softly. Not a question, simply truth. Vesper wanted to deny it, to pretend this was nothing more than a bride's nerves. But she could not lie to him. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I know you're not him, but my body doesn't understand that." Crowshade nodded, unshaken. "Your first husband hurt you." She swallowed. "Yes. Not with fists. Never fists. But in ways that leave scars no one sees." Silence settled between them. Vesper braced herself for anger, rejection, disappointment. For him to see her as broken? Instead, when he spoke, his voice was gentler still. "Among my people," he said, "we believe the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Hurt lingers like heat trapped in stone. And stone cools only with time, with patience." He rose, and her pulse raced, but he did not approach her. He crossed to a parfleche bag near the wall, withdrew a small clay pot, sealed with leather, and returned to sit beside her, close enough for warmth, not for touch. "This is medicine," he said quietly. "My mother Isha used it to calm frightened horses. She said it reminded them the world still held sweetness." He opened the pot. The scent that rose was green and clean, like summer after rain. Vesper breathed it in, and for the first time that night, something in her chest loosened. "This is medicine," Crowshade said, lifting the small pot so she could see it. "It's made from river flowers. Smells like summer." He paused, then added quietly, "My mother Isha used it to steady frightened horses. She said it reminded them the world wasn't made only of danger, that there was sweetness in it too." He loosened the seal. The scent rose soft and green like grass after rain. Vesper Hale drew it in, and something tight inside her chest eased not all at once, but enough to notice a single knot loosening. "I'm going to touch you now," Crowshade said. His tone was calm and practical, the way a man spoke when explaining how to set a saddle or light a fire. "Not as a husband, just touch. My hand's on yours. If you want me to stop, you say stop, and I will. Do you understand?" Vesper nodded. She didn't trust her voice. When he took her hands, even that gentle contact made her flinch. Her body braced for what memory told it would come next, but nothing did. He only held her. His palms were warm and steady, his fingers resting loosely around her wrists. He didn't tighten his grip, didn't pull. He simply stayed there, waiting. Time passed. Firewood cracked softly. An owl called somewhere beyond the lodge. Slowly, so slowly she didn't realize it was happening. Tension slipped from her shoulders, her jaw, her clenched stomach. Her hands stopped shaking. Her breath deepened. The fear remained, but it no longer screamed. It whispered. "Good," Crowshade murmured. His thumb traced a small circle at her wrist where her pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. "You're doing well. You're very brave." No one had ever called her that. Abel Knox had called her obedient, dutiful, adequate. Her mother had called her sensible. Her students called her strict. Brave was a word meant for soldiers, explorers, people who did extraordinary things, not a schoolteacher afraid of her own wedding night. "I don't feel brave," Vesper said. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," Crowshade replied. "It's feeling fear and choosing to stay. You're here. You didn't run. That's bravery." He released one hand and dipped his fingers into the medicine, coating them with the cool salve. Slowly giving her every chance to pull away, he lifted his hand and touched her face, tracing her jaw with fingers slick cool, impossibly gentle. Vesper closed her eyes. His touch moved carefully, as if he were learning her by feel alone. Cheekbones, temples, The delicate skin beneath her eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. The bridge of her nose. The curve of her upper lip. The small cleft in her chin she had never liked. Wherever he touched, the medicine cooled her skin, carrying the scent of summer with it. "You're beautiful," he said softly. Not praise, not persuasion, but simple truth. "I'm not," Vesper replied out of habit. She'd been told all her life she was plain, too serious, too sharp-featured. "You are," Crochet said. "Your people look for the wrong things. Smallness, softness, women who take up little space." He brushed away her tears with his thumbs slow and careful. "My people see strength, endurance, a woman who survived and is still standing. That's beauty." Tears slipped free beneath her closed lids, and he caught them gently, as if they mattered. "I'm going to touch your neck now," he said. "Then your shoulders. Is that all right?" She nodded. His hand slid from her face to her throat, resting lightly over her pulse. He didn't press, he didn't hold. He waited, letting her body learn that his hands were not weapons that touch did not have to lead to pain. Then his hands moved to her shoulders. He began to work the tight muscles there, kneading knots she hadn't known she carried. The medicine warmed as it sank into her skin, releasing its scent with every careful press. Vesper felt herself soften, melting in ways she hadn't in years. He worked in silence, moving from shoulders to arms, to her back always, through the fabric of her dress, always unhurried. He found the places fear had hardened into muscle and eased them loose with patient hands. "Abel never touched me like this," Vesper said, unsure why she spoke his name here. Crochet's hand stilled. "How did he touch you?" he asked, not jealous, only wanting to understand. "Like I wasn't there," she said. "Like my body was something he used, not someone he was with. He never looked at my face, never asked what I wanted. He just took." Crochet drew a slow breath. "That's not how it should be," he said. "And it won't be how it is with us." "How will it be?" she asked, her voice small. "Like this," he said. "Slow, gentle, with questions, with waiting. I won't take anything from you. I'll only receive what you choose to give. And if that's not tonight or tomorrow or many nights from now, we'll wait." "There's no hurry," Crochet said quietly. "We have a lifetime." His hands returned to her back, moving slow and steady along her spine. As he worked, Vesper Hale felt something give way inside her, a barrier she had raised so long ago she'd forgotten it existed. The release came all at once. She broke down, deep sobs tearing through her, her body shaking with the force of it. Crochet didn't try to stop her. He didn't speak. He simply kept touching her. His hands stayed warm and certain an anchor while everything else gave way. She cried for a long time, for the frightened girl on her first wedding night, for the woman she became afterward, for every moment she had stayed silent while Abel Knox used her body as if it were empty of spirit. She cried for the tenderness she had never known, for the pleasure she'd never been allowed to imagine, for the simple mercy of being touched by someone who cared whether she felt anything at all. When the storm finally passed, when she felt hollowed out and strangely calm, she turned within Crochet's arms and looked up at him. His dark eyes held no pity, no unease, only steady acceptance warmth that asked nothing and offered everything. "Will you hold me?" she asked. "Just hold you," he said. "Nothing more. Not yet. For as long as you need." He drew her against his chest. Vesper rested her head beneath his shoulder, listening to the slow, even beat of his heart. His hand moved gently along her back, a rhythm that matched his breathing. And she felt herself sink into a peace she hadn't known since childhood, perhaps had never known at all. "I want to tell you something." Crowshade set his voice low against her ear. And I want you to hear it, to remember it, even when fear tells you it isn't true. What is it? Vesper whispered. Your body is sacred, he said. It's a gift from the Creator, a home for your spirit, a vessel for every joy and sorrow you'll ever carry. It deserves reverence. It deserves gentleness. It deserves pleasure, he continued softly, not just pain. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you if you let me. Vesper pressed her face into his chest, hiding fresh tears. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever made her believe her body was anything other than a duty, a burden, a thing to be endured. For 31 years she had tried to take up less space to soften herself to disappear. And here was this man, this warrior from a world far from her own, telling her she was sacred. I want to let you, she whispered. I want to believe you. I'm just afraid, I know, Crowshade said. We'll be afraid together. Then slowly, we won't be. One day there will be no fear at all, only trust, only sweetness, only the joy of two people who have learned each other completely. They lay together through the night, clothed and chaste beneath the buffalo robes wrapped in each other's warmth. Crowshade continued to touch her, never pressing, never asking, only the patient sharing of warmth in the dark. He brushed her hair, traced her hands, rested his fingers at her wrist, where her pulse beat calm and steady. With every touch, Vesper felt herself returning to her body. Sensations emerged that weren't pain. Possibilities opened where fear had lived. She fell asleep in his arms, and for the first time in years, Abel Knox did not find her in her dreams. The days that followed unfolded slowly, like wildflowers opening across the prairie. Crowshade kept his word. He never rushed her, never claimed what she wasn't ready to give. Instead, he taught her safety through touch. Night after night, his hands spoke a language of care rather than control. At first he touched her only through cloth, learning her shape with patience, and even that awakened feelings she hadn't known were possible. When her fears softened, he asked permission to touch her skin. She gave it trembling but willing. His hands met her bare shoulders, her back, her arms, and she learned that simple contact could carry pleasure. He discovered sensitive places she'd never noticed and made them come alive with feeling. He traced the fragile bones of her ankles, the soft hollows behind her knees, the tender inside of her elbows. He ran his fingers through her hair until warmth spread across her scalp. He worked the tension from her hands and neck until she felt loose, weightless, unguarded. All the while, he spoke to her, asking what she felt, telling her what he felt, building a shared language she had never known. She learned to touch him, too hesitant at first then, with growing confidence. She learned the places that stilled his breath, the small sounds that escaped him, when her hand rested against his chest, feeling his heart answer hers. She learned that giving could be as powerful as receiving. That intimacy was not conquest, but movement shared, responsive, alive. Weeks passed before she was ready for more. And when that readiness came, it was not quiet. She told him she wanted to be loved fully, to give herself to someone who would receive her with reverence rather than entitlement. And Crowshade, faithful to every promise he had made, loved her as she deserved, slowly, gently, with endless patience, with questions and pauses and unwavering attention, with whispered words and careful touches that built sensation upon sensation, until she discovered her body was capable of things she had never imagined, stirred awake sensations she hadn't known her body could hold. The release came deep and overwhelming, so full it pulled tears from her eyes, even as laughter broke free from her lips in the same breath. Afterward, cradled in Crowshade's arms, her body still thrummed with the after-echo of what they had shared. Vesper Hale thought of that first hour on their wedding night, the way he had touched her, without asking for anything, the slow untying of fear, the careful patience that had carried her back to herself. She had believed then that he was preparing her for something that would come later. She hadn't understood that the waiting itself had been the gift. That trust, built piece by piece safety, earned breath by breath, was not a doorway to intimacy. It was intimacy. "Thank you," she whispered into the dark. Crowshade's arms tightened around her. "For what? For waiting," she said softly. "For touching me when I couldn't bear to be touched. For helping me find my way back when I didn't think I ever could." He kissed the crown of her head, and she felt his smile against her hair. "You were always ready," he said. "You just needed remembering. You needed someone to remind you that your body isn't your enemy. That pleasure isn't something to fear, that tenderness belongs to you as much as to anyone who's ever lived." Vesper closed her eyes and let herself sink into his warmth, into the safety she had searched for across so many years. She had come to the Crowlands expecting solitude. Instead, she found a man who had spent an hour doing nothing but holding her, teaching her she was worth touching, opening a door to a love she had never believed was meant for her. She had arrived trembling. He had met her with patience, and together in the quiet shelter of their lodge, they built something neither had dared to imagine, something sacred, something healing, something that felt like coming home. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso Legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.